The dusty winds howled across the barren plains of Kepler 9, a forgotten rock of a planet on the edge of human territory. Tom Blake leaned back in his creaky chair, boots propped up on the control panel of his tiny outpost. He was a pilot, a mechanic, and, on days like this, a bored dreamer staring out at the endless orange haze. His ship, the Dusty Hawk, sat parked outside, its scratched hull glinting faintly under the weak sun. Life out here was quiet, too quiet, until the sky ripped open with a scream of metal and fire. A ship, not human, tumbled out of the clouds, spiraling wildly before crashing into the dunes a mile away. Tom bolted upright, heart pounding. "Well, that's new," he muttered, grabbing his toolkit and a worn jacket. He didn't know what he'd find, but his curiosity wouldn't let him sit still. The trek across the sand was quick, his boots kicking up clouds of dust as he reached the smoking wreck. It was sleek, all curves and glowing panels, nothing like the clunky human ships he knew. Alien. Before he could get closer, a figure stumbled out of the wreckage. Tall, thin, with shimmering blue skin and eyes like liquid gold, she straightened up, clutching a jagged piece of metal as a makeshift weapon. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the wind. "Stay back, creature. I have no need for your kind." Tom raised his hands, trying not to laugh. "Easy there. I'm just here to help. Name's Tom. You okay?" She glared at him, her golden eyes narrowing. "I am Lyra, of the Vaxen Collective. And I do not require assistance from a human." The word dripped with disdain, like it tasted bad in her mouth. Tom noticed her trembling legs and the gash across her arm, leaking a faint silver liquid. "Sure looks like you do," he said, stepping closer despite her warning. "That ship's not flying anytime soon. Let me take a look." Lyra bristled, her long fingers tightening around the metal shard. "You think your primitive tools can fix Vaxen technology? We surpassed your kind centuries ago." Tom shrugged, unfazed. "Maybe. But I've patched up worse with less. Your call." She hesitated, her pride warring with the reality of her situation. Finally, she lowered the shard, though her stare remained icy. "Very well. But do not think this makes us equals." Tom grinned, kneeling beside the wreck to inspect the damage. Sparks flew from torn circuits, and a strange hum pulsed from the ship's core. He didn't understand half of it, but that never stopped him before. "What happened up there?" he asked, prying open a panel. Lyra crossed her arms, her voice tight. "Raiders. They attacked my vessel, stole something precious. I barely escaped." Tom glanced up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Precious, huh? Sounds like a story. Care to share?" "It is not your concern," she snapped. "Just fix this, human." Tom chuckled, pulling out a wrench. "Fair enough. But if we're stuck together, might as well make it interesting." He worked fast, his hands steady despite the alien tech. Lyra watched, her expression shifting from scorn to faint curiosity. She'd never seen a human up close, messy hair, rough skin, so unlike the polished perfection of her people. Yet here he was, fearless, diving into a problem he couldn't possibly understand. Hours passed, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows across the dunes. Tom rigged a temporary power line, enough to get the ship's lights flickering back on. "Not bad for primitive, right?" he said, standing and brushing dust off his hands. Lyra didn't reply, but her silence felt less hostile. Then the ground shook, a low rumble that made them both freeze. "What was that?" Tom asked, scanning the horizon. Lyra's eyes widened. "The raiders. They've tracked me here." Before Tom could respond, dark shapes appeared in the distance, ships, fast and jagged, cutting through the haze. Lyra gripped her shard again, her voice low. "They want the energy core I was guarding. If they get it, my people are finished." Tom didn't hesitate. Then we'd better move. My outpost's got defenses. Come on. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the dusty hawk. She yanked free, glaring. I do not run with humans. But the roar of engines grew louder, and even her pride couldn't argue with survival. They reached the outpost just as the first raider ship swooped overhead, its weapons charging with a menacing glow. Tom shoved Lyra inside, slamming the door shut. Welcome to my world, he said, flashing a reckless grin. Let's see if this primitive human can keep us alive. Lyra stared at him, her golden eyes flickering with something new, uncertainty. For the first time, she wondered if she'd misjudged him. And as the battle loomed, their story was only beginning. The outpost trembled as the raider ships circled above, their engines roaring like angry beasts. Tom darted to the control panel, fingers flying over switches and buttons. Dust fell from the ceiling, coating his messy hair, but he didn't care. Hold tight, he shouted to Lyra, who stood rigid near the door, her blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. The outpost's defenses, old cannons Tom had scavenged and rebuilt, hung to life, firing bright bursts into the sky. One raider ship veered off, smoking, but the others kept coming. Lyra's golden eyes narrowed. Your weapons are crude. They won't stop them for long. Tom smirked, not looking up from the controls. Crude works just fine when it hits. Buy us some time, that's all we need. A loud bang shook the walls as a raider blast struck nearby, and Lyra stumbled, catching herself against the wall. She glared at Tom, but he was already moving, grabbing a heavy crate from the corner. Help me with this, he said, dragging it toward the door. We'll block them out. She hesitated, then joined him, her slim arms surprisingly strong as they shoved the crate into place. This is pointless, she muttered. They'll burn through this in seconds. Tom wiped sweat from his forehead, grinning. Maybe. But seconds matter. Now, tell me about that energy core. What's so special it's worth all this trouble? Lyra's lips tightened, but the urgency of the moment loosened her tongue. It's the pulse core. It powers our cities, our ships, everything. Without it, my people will fall to chaos. Tom whistled, impressed. Sounds like a big deal. Where is it now? Lyra's voice grew sharp. The raiders took it when they attacked me. I was bringing it to a safe outpost when they struck. If we don't get it back, she didn't finish, but her clenched fist said enough. Tom nodded, his mind racing. Then we fix your ship, chase them down, and take it back. Simple. Lyra stared at him, incredulous. Simple. You think your junk heap can match vaccine technology? Before he could reply, the outpost shook again, harder this time. A crack split the ceiling, and wind howled through the gap, carrying stinging sand. We're out of time here, Tom said, grabbing his toolkit. Let's get to your ship. Move. Lyra followed, her pride swallowing hard as they sprinted through the storm. The raiders were landing now, dark figures spilling out onto the dunes, but the swirling sand gave Tom and Lyra cover. They reached her crashed vessel, its sleek hull half buried but still intact. Inside, the ship was a mess, wires sparking, panels smashed. Tom dropped to his knees, inspecting the damage. Engines fried, but the core frame solid. I can work with this. Lyra crossed her arms, skeptical. You repair this? It's beyond your understanding. Tom pulled out a wrench, already prying open a panel. Maybe I don't need to understand it all. Just enough to make it fly. He worked fast, his hands steady despite the chaos outside. Lyra watched, her curiosity growing despite herself. This human didn't hesitate, didn't doubt, he just acted. The wind picked up, a full sandstorm now raging outside. It battered the ship, rocking it on its side, but it also hid them from the raiders. Tom saw the chance. This storm's our shield, he said, splicing wires together. If we can get airborne, they won't see us coming. Lyra shook her head. The navigation system is dead. Even if you start the engine, we'll crash again. Tom paused, then grinned. Not if I rig it to my ship's AI. The Dusty Hawk can guide us. Lyra blinked, caught off guard. You'd link your primitive machine to my ship? Tom shrugged. Primitive's what I've got. Let's make it work. He dashed back to the Dusty Hawk, dragging a thick cable through the sand. The storm howled, sand biting at his skin, but he didn't stop. Back inside Lyra's ship, he hooked the cable to her console, syncing the two systems. Lights flickered, then steadied as the Dusty Hawk's AI took over. Good girl, Tom muttered, patting the console. Lyra stared at the setup, her voice softer now. This might actually function. Tom laughed. High praise from you. Hold on, here we go. He hit the ignition, and the ship groaned, then lifted off the ground, wobbling but rising. The sandstorm swallowed them, hiding their escape as the raiders' shouts faded behind. Lyra gripped her seat, her golden eyes wide. You're reckless, she said, but there was less bite in her tone. Reckless gets results, Tom replied, steering through the haze. Now, where'd those raiders go with your core? Lyra pulled up a faint signal on her scanner, a blinking dot moving fast. There. They're heading to the canyons. Tom adjusted course, the ship steadying as the storm thinned. Then that's where we're going. You ready to fight for your people? Lyra met his gaze, her blue skin catching the console's glow. I've always been ready. But you, why risk this for me? Tom shrugged, his grin softening. Curiosity, mostly. And maybe a little stubbornness. Can't let those raiders win. For the first time, Lyra didn't argue. She nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. The ship soared toward the canyons, the pulse core, and their next challenge, waiting ahead. This human, crude or not, was starting to surprise her. The canyons of Kepler 9 stretched out below like jagged scars on the planet's surface, their rocky walls glowing faintly orange under the dying light. Tom piloted Lyra's ship with steady hands, the Dusty Hawk's AI humming through the patched-up controls. The sandstorm had faded, leaving a tense quiet as they followed the raiders' signal. Lyra sat beside him, her golden eyes locked on the scanner. They're close, she said, her voice tight. The pulse core's signal is strong now. Tom glanced at her, noting the way her blue fingers gripped the console. Good. Let's catch them off guard. He pushed the ship lower, skimming the canyon edges to stay hidden. Lyra shook her head. You fly like a madman. One wrong move, and we're smashed against those rocks. Tom grinned. Mad's my style. Keeps things interesting. She didn't reply, but her silence felt less like judgment and more like focus. The scanner beeped louder, and ahead, a flicker of movement caught Tom's eye, 3 raider ships parked near a narrow pass, their jagged hulls blending with the shadows. Dark figures moved around them, unloading crates. There's your core, Tom said, slowing the ship. Looks like they're setting up camp. Lyra leaned forward, her voice hard. We can't let them keep it. The pulse core belongs to the Vaxxon. Tom nodded. Then we hit them fast. Got any weapons on this fancy ship? Lyra hesitated, then tapped a panel. A low hum filled the cabin as 2 sleek cannons slid out from the hull. These are precise, but they need a steady hand. Tom raised an eyebrow. Precise, huh? Let's see what they can do. He angled the ship for a surprise attack, but before he could fire, a blast rocked them from behind. The console sparked, and Lyra shouted, They've spotted us. Another raider ship swooped in, its weapons blazing. Tom yanked the controls, sending their ship into a wild spin between the canyon walls. Rocks exploded around them as he dodged the barrage. "Hold on," he yelled, grinning despite the chaos. Lyra gripped her seat, her blue skin paling. "You're insane," she snapped, but she swung the cannons into action, firing sharp bursts that clipped the enemy's wing. It veered off, trailing smoke. Tom leveled the ship, breathing hard. "Nice shot. Guess we're a team now." Lyra didn't respond, her focus on the scanner. Two more coming from the east. Tom spotted them, fast, predatory shapes closing in. He didn't have time to think, just act. "Hang tight," he said, diving the ship straight down into the canyon's depths. The walls closed in, barely wide enough for their wings, but Tom kept it steady, the raiders hot on their tail. Blasts lit up the dark, and one grazed their hull, shaking the ship. "Shields are failing," Lyra warned, her voice sharp. Tom gritted his teeth. "We don't need shields, we need speed." He pushed the engines harder, the patched-up ship groaning but holding. The canyon twisted ahead, a sharp turn looming. The raiders fired again, and Tom saw his chance. "Now," he shouted, pulling up hard. The ship shot upward, scraping the canyon edge, while the raiders, too fast to adjust, slammed into the rocks. A fireball erupted behind them. Lyra stared at the wreckage, then at Tom. "That was impossible." He laughed, wiping sweat from his face. "Not impossible, just human." She didn't argue, her golden eyes flickering with something new. They circled back to the raider camp, landing quietly behind a ridge. The enemy was distracted, still unloading crates, unaware of the crash. Tom grabbed a plasma pistol from his belt. "Time to get your core back. You with me?" Lyra nodded, pulling a slim, glowing blade from her side. "I'll lead. You follow." Tom smirked. "Thought I was too primitive to keep up." She ignored him, stepping out into the dusty air. They crept closer, staying low. The raiders, hulking figures in spiked armor, guarded a glowing crate that pulsed with energy. The pulse core. Tom's heart raced. This was it. But then a shadow moved, a massive raider, twice the size of the others, turned and spotted them. "Intruders," it roared, raising a heavy cannon. Tom didn't hesitate. He tackled Lyra behind a rock as the cannon fired, the blast shattering stone where they'd stood. "Stay down," he hissed, popping up to return fire. His pistol cracked, hitting the raider's arm, but it barely flinched. Lyra sprang up, her blade flashing as she charged. She moved like liquid, slicing through the raider's armor with precision. It fell, but more came, weapons blazing. Tom rolled out, drawing their fire, then lobbed a makeshift grenade, cobbled together from outpost scraps. It exploded in a flash, scattering the enemy. Lyra finished another with a swift strike, her breath heavy. Together, they cleared the camp, leaving only the crate. Tom kicked it open, revealing the pulse core, a shimmering orb that hummed with power. Lyra knelt beside it, her hands trembling. "We did it," she whispered. Tom grinned, holstering his pistol. "Told you I'd get you here." She looked up, her golden eyes meeting his. "You risked your life, for my people." "Why?" He shrugged. "Seemed like the right thing. Plus, I hate losing." For the first time, Lyra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're not what I expected, human." Tom laughed. "Good. Keeps you guessing." But the ground rumbled beneath them, a deep groan echoing through the canyon. The core's energy pulsed wildly. "Uh-oh," Tom said, stepping back. "That doesn't sound friendly." Lyra's face tightened. "It's unstable. We need to move, now." Their victory was short-lived, and the real fight was just beginning. The canyon shook harder, dust raining from the walls as the pulse core's glow flickered wildly in Tom's hands. He held it tight, the orb's hum vibrating through his arms. "This thing's alive," he said, glancing at Lyra. Her blue skin gleamed with sweat, her golden eyes scanning the crate. "It's reacting to something," she replied, voice tense. "The raiders must have triggered it. We need to find its source, fast." The ground cracked beneath them, a warning they couldn't ignore. Tom nodded, tucking the core under his arm. "Any ideas where to start?" Lyra pulled a small device from her belt, its screen flashing with symbols Tom couldn't read. "There's an energy spike deeper in the canyon. It's old, buried. Maybe a vault." Tom grinned. "A treasure hunt? I'm in. Lead the way." Lyra hesitated, then took off, her long strides cutting through the dust. Tom followed, the core pulsing like a heartbeat against his chest. The canyon narrowed as they went, its walls towering higher, blocking out the weak sun. Shadows stretched long and eerie, but Tom kept his pistol ready, ears sharp for trouble. Lyra's scanner beeped louder, guiding them to a sheer rock face. She stopped, running her fingers over the stone. "Here," she said, pressing a hidden panel. The rock rumbled, splitting open to reveal a dark tunnel. "Nice trick," Tom said, peering inside. "Your people built this?" Lyra nodded, stepping in. "Long ago. It's a safeguard for the core. Only Vaxxan can enter." Tom raised an eyebrow, following her. "Guess I'm your +1. The tunnel sloped down, its walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed in sync with the core. The air grew thick, heavy with energy. Lyra's voice softened. "This place was lost to us. The core's power must have woken it." Tom whistled. "Lucky us. What's waiting down there?" She didn't answer, her focus on the path. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center stood a pedestal, carved with strange patterns, and above it floated a faint energy field. "That's it," Lyra said, pointing. "The vault's lock. The core belongs there." Tom stepped closer, but the floor shifted, a trap. Spikes shot up from the ground, forcing him to leap back. "Whoa! Friendly welcome." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "It's a test. Only the worthy can reach it." Tom laughed, brushing dust off his jacket. "Worthy, huh? Let's see what I've got." He studied the floor, noticing faint lines, pressure plates. "Step where I step," he said, moving carefully. Lyra followed, her grace matching his caution. They dodged more traps, lasers slicing from the walls, pits opening underfoot, but Tom's quick thinking kept them alive. "Duck," he shouted as a beam flashed overhead, pulling Lyra down with him. She landed beside him, breathing hard. "You're resourceful," she admitted, her tone less sharp. Tom grinned. "Years of fixing junk teaches you a few tricks." They reached the pedestal, but the energy field sparked, pushing them back. Lyra frowned. "It needs the core to deactivate." Tom held it out. "Then let's plug it in." He tossed it gently to her, trusting her precision. She caught it, her hands steady, and placed it into the pedestal's slot. The field flared, then faded, revealing a hidden compartment below. Inside lay a map, a glowing hologram of the planet, with a blinking dot far underground. "The core's origin," Lyra said, awed. "It's still active." Tom leaned in. "So we're not done yet?" Lyra shook her head. "No. We need to take it there to stabilize it." Before they could plan, a low growl echoed through the chamber. Shadows moved, raiders, the survivors from the camp, weapons drawn. Tom cursed under his breath. "They don't quit, do they?" The leader, a scarred brute with a mechanical arm, stepped forward. "Give us the core, human. You're out of your depth." Tom smirked, stepping in front of Lyra. Funny, I was about to say the same to you. The raiders charged, and chaos erupted. Tom fired his pistol, ducking behind the pedestal as blasts lit up the dark. Lyra fought beside him, her blade slicing through armor with deadly grace. They were outnumbered, but Tom improvised. He kicked a loose crystal into a trap plate, triggering spikes that impaled a raider. See? Junk's useful, he shouted, grinning at Lyra. She didn't reply, but her eyes flickered with something like amusement. Together, they held the line, thinning the enemy until the leader lunged, his mechanical arm swinging. Tom dodged, but the blow grazed his jacket, tearing it open. He stumbled, chest bare, the cold air hitting his skin. Lyra froze mid-strike, her gaze locking on him. His muscles, honed from years of hard work, flexed as he tackled the leader, pinning him down. Stay down. Tom growled, finishing him with a solid punch. The last raiders fled, leaving silence. Lyra stared, her golden eyes wide, the core's glow reflecting off her stunned face. What? Tom asked, catching his breath. She blinked, flustered. Your strength. It's unexpected. Tom laughed, standing tall. Thought humans were weak. Lyra looked away, her voice soft. I may have been wrong. The chamber rumbled again, the core's energy spiking. Tom grabbed it from the pedestal. Save the compliments. We've got a planet to save. Lyra nodded, her respect growing. They'd survived the vault, but the real test lay ahead, deeper underground. Together, they stepped into the unknown, a team forged in fire and dust.